Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 6, Episode 12 of our weekly P&Q&C&A&T. And for the uninitiated, or just the people who have forgotten, that stands for podcast, questions, comments, answers, and talking. The podcast stands for the fact that this is now available in multiple formats. It is a YouTube video. It is also a podcast that you can reach by clicking on the links in the description if you are currently on the YouTube video. The Q stands for questions, C for comments, answers, talking. We're gonna ask. Some people are gonna ask us some questions. We're gonna answer them. Maybe we're gonna ask each other some questions and answer them. We're gonna address some general comments. It's not always a question, but if somebody sends one in, we'll also have that, and then we'll answer the questions and we'll just sort of talk in general because we always end up getting sidetracked longer and longer the more this series has gone on.
Yeah, I mean technically this is really a Q&A, which is why the playlist says Q&A. Yeah. But the extra letters is sort of an excuse for us to justify wandering off topic a bit.
Well, we also sort of thought it was funny, which is a running pattern with us, is that we think we're funny. And
that's true.
And now we've continued to add letters, and it's just it's so hard to stop once you've started. It feels like
chips.
It feels like the joke only works if you continue to commit to it.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, nobody's complained about it so far, and there's a couple times that people suggested new letters to add, so I guess there was some excitement once upon a time, perhaps, for the naming scheme. So
there's a bit of buy-in, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can I start? So I want to start a little bit different. Last week I did this too, so this week I learned thing.
Yeah, and you gave me sort of a very brief version of this, and I realized that I knew what you were talking about, which was sort of a little exciting.
And I was hoping to surprise you. Okay, so this week I learned about a mathematician named Abraham Wald. Mm-hmm. And how I learned about him was I was on Twitter. Oh yeah, old man on Twitter. Mm-hmm. I was on Twitter. I saw a picture of an airplane, and not like a detail one, but like a schematic kind of drawing. And there were a bunch of red dots on it, grouped in certain places.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be a distribution of damage on airplanes during World War II.
Mm-hmm. And this was the moment when I realized, when you got to about this part where you're talking about this, is when I realized where you're going with this.
So what I was going to ask you was, what should you do with this information? And maybe instead of asking you, because if you already know it,
I'm going to tell you. First off, before
whoever's listening should pause it for a minute and think about what they want to say.
Yeah.
So you got a picture of an airplane, red dots bunched up of where the damage is.
And you can actually go ahead and put your answer in the comments too now if you want to take a second and pause it and see if you got it right, and then come back, and I guess if you want afterwards, if you're embarrassed, you could remove your comment or edit it or whatever. But this would be interesting to see what people think. Yeah, so what do you think? You've got a schematic of an airplane, you've got a bunch of red dots where it's been hit, and instead of answering what I think should be done with this information, I will answer what other people who weren't Abraham Wald thought you should do with this information. Other people who weren't him thought you should reinforce every place with a red dot, because that was where the plane was obviously getting shot the most.
Right. And that was, I believe, a mistake.
Mm-hmm. Because
this is a perfect illustration of survivor bias, where the planes that they got their hands on were the planes that made it back. Yeah. And his insight, his first biggest insight, was saying, okay, so planes are getting hit pretty much randomly. They're getting hit all over, right? It's not that there's some special areas that are attracting bullets to the plane.
Yeah, it's basically just surface area and the ease of access from certain angles that other stuff is likely to be.
Right. So I wonder if I should explain, or I think that there's I think it's a Wikipedia page that mentions. So maybe I'm going to just read that first.
Just
and
then a little quote.
Embellish on it. So during World War II, Wald was a member of the statistical research group SRG, where he applied his statistical skills to various wartime problems. These included methods of sequential analysis and sampling inspection. One of the problems that the SRG worked on was to examine the distribution of damage to aircraft to provide advice on how to minimize bomber losses to enemy fire. There was an inclination within the military to consider providing greater protection to parts that received more damage, but Wald made the assumption that damage must be more uniformly distributed, and that the aircraft that did return or show up in the samples were hit in the less vulnerable parts. Wald noted that the study only considered the aircraft that had survived their missions. Mm-hmm. The bombers that had been shot down were not present for the damage assessment. The holes in the returning aircraft then represented areas where a bomber could take damage and still return home safely. Wald proposed that the Navy instead reinforce the areas where the returning aircraft were unscathed, since those were the areas that, if hit, would cause the plane to be lost. His work is considered seminal in the then fledgling discipline of operational research.
So that was a little bit maybe dry, just sort of informative because it's Wikipedia, but that's a really cool sort of discovery, is that it's like the important part is actually to reinforce the stuff that doesn't look like it's getting hit, because the stuff that doesn't look like it's getting hit goes down when it does get hit.
And you don't get them back.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the areas that are so vulnerable that if they get hit, you're not seeing those planes again.
Yeah, and I have a kind of adjacent story that I was aware of that I think I learned these insights, sort of a 2-for-1, which is I don't remember if this was the introduction of infantry helmets or the improvement of infantry helmets, but on whatever the introduction of some form of extra head protection, what they actually found was that head injuries went way up. And the reason why head injuries went way up is because the people who were being shot in the head and dying was going down, but those people who were shot in the head and didn't die, it still rattled their skull a little bit. So
they survived.
Yeah, so they survived, exactly.
Dead.
Yeah, so the statistics on introducing helmets was actually that more people got head injuries, but less people got dead injuries. Like less people were shot in the head and killed, and more people got out of it with something that was leading up to, but not reaching.
I feel bad
death.
about laughing a little bit, because clearly, dying is a serious kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's just I don't know. It seems obvious now, but I guess when you're right in it, your instinct is not, your intuition is not always the right thing, right?
Yeah. So that's an interesting sort of kind of adjacent fact, where improving the quality of protective gear when stuff is often fatal can increase the number of injuries. And I'm sure that's not fully universal. There might be some exceptions to that, but I'm sort of generalizing more maybe than is fair to with the data, but
yeah, only when it's successful though, right? Mm-hmm. I guess if you're making an intervention that's not successful, it's not going to really make that difference.
Yeah. So there we go. Yeah, that was something really interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that was that was a cool thing to remember and to recognize that I still remember, because it's not particularly prevalent. It's not at the front of my mind in my day to day, right? So that's the sort of stuff that you never know if you're going to lose.
Okay, so I wasn't prepared for this, but now that you've made one connection, I've made another one. This is very similar in terms of the logical flaw, where you have cards that are two-sided, and you've got a set of 4 cards out, and every, there's a statement that's every green card has a square behind it, and every circle is red, and you're supposed to say which ones you have to flip to prove or disprove the theory. And the gut reaction is always to go in the wrong direction of the logical statement. Well, it's not always, but people tend to, if they don't take a step back and say, so what do I actually need to do to show that it's not true?
Yeah, and I think that's I've heard that one contextualized in multiple ways, actually. I've heard that one contextualized that way, and also in terms of just, I think, pure numbers, like numbered cards. And I forget which one it is, but one of them is actually easier when you reframe the problem in the right way. It makes more inherent logical sense how many you should flip over. For people who don't know what we're talking about, I guess you'd have to figure out some way to Google it, because I don't even know how we Google
Maybe
that
I'll
exactly.
try. Yeah, after we do this, I'll see if I can look up some summary of that problem, and maybe link it in the description if I can find it.
Yeah, but so there you go. That's a random interesting fact from us, I guess. We're becoming a war history fun fact podcast.
Well, but here's the issue, right? I mean, one of the difficulties always was, I mean, it's hard to say it's a difficulty now that we've gotten into, I think, like 700 to 800 videos now. But to me, when we started it was a content issue. It was coming up with new ideas, and when we were thinking, oh, we'll just do glitches, coming up with something every few months was hard.
Yeah, because it turns out there's not a lot of glitches.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that, I mean, people have said that before, right? Where we should just do like more glitch videos, but there's a limit to how much you can do, and you're not really adding anything. And it's one of those things where, yeah, you can do it again, but then all it means is that people are going to watch the new one instead of the old one.
Yeah, and there was a while when we sort of did do that again, where our challenge resets were like every month, so it would just be updated with the new character.
Yeah, instead of like how we do now with the update each week to say, okay, because now there's a challenge every week, right? So there'd be a challenge once every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we'd say, oh yeah, it still works. This is a challenge reset. We're just going to demonstrate it. So yeah, it's just interesting how our channel's evolved over time.
Yeah, and I think we definitely noticed a little bit of a drop off in views when we started just updating the thumbnail, just because less people were seeing it and clicking on it every time it popped up. But I think it's been probably better for our channel just in terms of spam and worthless duplicated content.
Right, exactly. Like, it's not. I always feel bad, or when I watch a video, I get frustrated when the thumbnail doesn't actually reflect what the content is. And if it's just duplicate content over and over again, I don't want to be contributing that kind of stuff. Yeah. And although every once in a while, I think, like, not frequently, but if stuff changes, obviously, it might be worth making update videos on occasion. Yeah. Just so that it's the most... Oh, this is it. Look, they both did their specials at Supers at the same time.
Oh, this is bad for the podcast listening audience. But yeah, oh, wow. So, yeah, we saw 2 full sets of animations there, and it looked like we got the...
Overlapping.
It looks like we got we got the Doomsday perspective for camera angles.
All right, so what's crazy about this is...
Or not Doomsday. Sorry, Bane.
This is a team that's set up for specials. All our specials are gone. No access to them. Right? You can see the tapping, trying to do special 2, trying to do special 1, nothing. Can't tag in or out. So for a team that has no real boost to basic damage, it's going to be impossible to win this because... Yeah.
This is very cinematic, though.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the tapping.
Okay, Nightwing's got Claw of Horus, too. So that means that, you see when he did the special 1, he was actually... See, I can't do a special. This would be the perfect time to... Oh, and did it crash? This would be the perfect time to do a super. Or no, sorry, not super. Special 1 with Batgirl when she was tagging in, right?
This would also be a great time to pause and quit.
Yeah, there's no pause button.
Wow, okay.
Okay, so well, let's get to the first question, or should we just watch? It is pretty cinematic. Oh, there we go.
There we go. We're lost. Done. Yeah, no, because it's removed the artifice of the game. It's like Call of Juarez. We did a couple videos on that like a long time ago, but on the hardest difficulty, how it removes all the HUD in all your indicators. Right. So you just have to sort of guess at how many bullets you have in a clip and all that stuff, and so it removes a ton of the information. It's actually much harder to play, but it is also more sort of cinematic or natural looking.
Right.
Okay.
Should we get to our first question?
Yeah, I think it's been long enough. Our first question comes from Twitch ItsKynetic, and they say, question for your next P&Q&A&C&T. They've mixed up the order a bit there, but that's fair. You can tell that way that they've actually typed it out themselves, which is, in a way, a little more impressive, right?
Yeah. I mean, I get it wrong, too.
Yeah, that's true. I have to look at it. I no longer know the title of our own video series, which is a little bit worrying, but it is what it is. So anyways, they have a question for us, and they say, I have been playing Injustice pretty much since its release. I have all the store-bought characters and many pack exclusive characters up to at least Elite 7, some to Elite 10. I was wondering what you guys recommend in order to get augmentation cards faster in order to max out crit damage and crit chance on characters. Thanks, guys.
So the first part of the question, which tells me that it's the right question, is that it's talking about the crit damage and crit chance, because I think those are way more important than the health and damage augmentations.
Yeah, this was actually a really good question, I think, because that's I think in the late game, right? Sort of where we're at. This is I think one of those questions that's a little more relevant to our experience, because this is sort of the stage that we are also at with Twitch ItsKynetic. And unfortunately, we don't have a great answer.
Yeah, because the only consistent way really has been Survivor. And so there is the glitch to let you play Survivor as much as you want. I think it's totally worth it. Unfortunately, there's no glitch to get extra last laugh tickets. But, I mean, there's other ways to get augmentations, but the paid packs have been too expensive for what they are, and where you just don't get enough. Oh, and one of the theories, I guess, one of the underlying theories about the game, to understand it, is that your base stats, so the stats on a card that's E0, level 0, is a certain number. and the maximum augmentations that you can get for the crit chance is 50. Crit damage is 150. No, sorry, 100. Base is 150. You get up to 250, and the attack and damage is 300 to each of the base stats.
Yeah, this is not for ItsKynetic. This is sort of a basic primer to everybody else who doesn't know, because I'm assuming ItsKynetic has been with it long enough to understand the systems.
So I think what people have been running into, at least on an Android for the last year and a half up until now, it was Survivor was broken. They were only giving away Suicide Squad gears. People pretty much had them quickly, like in the first month or two. So there was a temptation to hold on to it and bank your tickets, like we've shown before, so that when the gears finally rotate out, like they did with this update, then you can get you have plenty of tickets to try to get the gears you don't have. And once you remove that, then you're you know, it's worse. It's worse when you can't do anything, and it's better, but still not great. And I'd actually recommend using the airplane. I was going airplane mode all at once.
Yeah.
The airplane mode refund glitch. The problem is it's tedious, right?
Yeah.
So it's really important that you save enough so that you can cash out more than one at a time before refunding. And I like to do it in groups of 5, where I have to get at least one crit, either damage. Or I'll put the link in the video too, right? I mean, it's in the first video in our glitch playlist. But you have to. I think you can't just do it for each one because it's tedious. I think you have to have enough last laugh tickets saved up so that you can do a group of a few, and then it's almost worth it then to go back and reset it so you can get your tickets back.
Just for the amount of time it takes to play. And yeah, so I mean, as far as farming within Survivor, I would definitely use the unlimited Survivor play time shifting glitch, and I would recommend to just play with basically probably the best way I find to do it is to play until the fights get slow. And that can either be play until your first team starts to run into some issues, or if you want, play with your first few swap outs, like swap in bronzes for golds, if you do that, or silvers for golds, or however you want for those easy fights. And so you play until the fights get slow, which I think can be a little bit different depending on the person and your strategy, but rounded down to the nearest set of 3 battles that will give you like the last laugh ticket. Guaranteed. So that's I mean, just within the actual gameplay itself, despite the fact that you can't like bypass it, that's what I find best just for a personal strategy to get the most last laugh tickets for the time spent playing, and then couple that with the refund glitch to make sure that it is worth your while when you actually do end up opening them up.
And the other thing actually that's changed with the recent update is getting nth metal. So it's changed the calculation, or I know people say calculus, changed the arithmetic a little bit, because I used to play just as far as I wanted and then not worry about losing because none of the rewards were as good as last laugh tickets. But now the nth metal is available, even a 10% a slightly under 10% chance, I'm not willing to give up the 25 or maybe 50 nth metal that I get in a run. So I am much less likely to just play out all my replacements, like all 3 replacements, and try to cash out before that happens. Yeah,
especially because it's just the time I find is often not worth it.
Right.
Because the amount of time it actually takes to reset it is low enough that it's kind of counteracts the longer fights.
Right. And because there's no glitch to get extra tickets, I mean, the tickets are valuable. And the analogy that I was thinking of was, it was like in some of the Pokemon games when you want to catch a legendary that are hard to catch, right? Sometimes they'll take off. And if you didn't want to use your only Master Ball, because I remember that most games you'd only have access to 1 Master Ball, right?
Yeah, although in the newer ones I think they've been giving you 2 sometimes, and it's been a little bit less consistent.
Okay. So it's the same kind of idea where you're picking, well, how many you're going to do before you reset it and try again. And in Pokemon, at least, it was maybe about 100 Pokeballs or maybe even Great Balls, because they were still cheap enough to be good. Or maybe, I mean, in the end game when you're grinding credits, Ultra Balls are okay too, right? But they're really expensive.
I remember you going into the fights with the legendary birds with a significant number of like Ultra Balls and like tossing them all when they were at like 1 health.
Right.
Paralyzed.
Oh, False Swipe was perfect, right? False swipe was the best.
Yeah, you need to use false swipe. You need to have, I think it was Thundershock that you were using, so something to paralyze them. Thunderwave,
Something with no damage.
Either way, status effect. False swipe them down to 1 health. Use the Great Balls, Ultra Balls, whatever.
And sometimes 100 wouldn't be enough.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, I can't remember which fights they were, but sometimes they would take off, right?
I think at least one of the legendary dogs would take off, and they would move around every time.
Yeah.
So you'd have 1 or 2, I think maybe 1 shot, and then they'd leave. And then for the legendary birds, I think they're just crazy hard to catch. And this was Emerald, right?
It might have been. So I'm thinking that the best advice I can... Yeah, that magic number to me for the last lap tickets is maybe every 5.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of like a few hundred, yeah, no way. Every 5, it should be at least 1 crit. And you won't always get that because there's going to be times where you get a bunch of gear, some last lap, and all of a sudden those 5 were worth nothing. I'd reset it. If I don't get at least 1 crit augmentation. And
yeah, so the way that you can do that is you can do it sort of deliberately every 5, or in a way that could potentially take less time and potentially take more time, depending on how lucky you are. You could open them in bigger batches, like 10, 20, 50, 100, and then at the end average out how many you've gotten. If you've gotten at least 1 in every 5, and then reset the whole batch. Right. I don't know if that's actually shorter or longer just based off of load times and everything and resetting it, but but those are sort of I think the 2 methods that you could take for using resets.
Yep.
Once you've set your own sort of personal goal for what percentage you need.
Yeah. Oh, can I now that we've answered that question, can I jump in with one of my own things?
Yeah, I think
not so much I learned this week.
Yeah, we've answered it. We've answered a single injustice question. I think we can talk about pretty much whatever we want for the rest of this episode.
Well, not for. I think we got another question too. But
no, I know we have more questions.
Just last week, I think to commemorate, not even last week, a few days ago, there was something a big article in the local papers. We get the Toronto Star, but I also looked up the Toronto Sun article about Neil Gaiman having filmed American Gods here, and the 2nd season just coming out.
Yeah. And
I'm just gonna read a little bit first, and maybe talk a little bit about how Neil Gaiman has really had an impact on me because of my fandom, and how he's basically went from comics to literature, and that sort of tracked with what I was doing at the same time. So I'm going to read just an excerpt from the article where they quote him. He says, he also holds a special place in his heart for Toronto. I remember talking once about Toronto and getting baffled pushback. Oh, you must say that about every city you go to. No. Toronto loved me first, and Toronto loved me best. Everything interesting I've ever done began in Toronto, often because Mark Asquith had something to do with it, which means you go back 30 years, there were at mega signings that went on for hours when that was something that wasn't happening anywhere else at the time. It happened here first. Here was where Prisoners of Gravity gave me their favorite guest award when nobody else knew who I was. It's all that kind of stuff. The signings were here first. I did the first evening with Neil Gaiman where I read Snow Glass Apples in a church. Toronto and I have something. It was the first place I was ever recognized in the street. It always happens here first. So coming back here for American Gods, it's like, yes, of course it is. And there's a clip from the Sun article where it seems like they're covering the same ground, but he says, I remember coming here in 1991 and there was a line of people around the block at Silver Snail. I had dinner plans for 9 p.m. and I got back to the hotel at 1 a.m. I missed dinner and I was having chocolate chip cookies in the bath and thinking, this is the glamorous life.
So there we go.
So, all right, so this is what's crazy, right? And I wish I'd saved some of that, the right things, the right kind of ephemera, because that church he was talking about, I was there. All right, so I'm going to mention a friend, because it's not like anybody will be identify him, or maybe they will, but the people who will probably aren't listening to this. So I have a friend who used to work at Back of Phoenix Books.
Yeah.
And he got me tickets to those events that would otherwise be difficult to get because they were in short supply or because you had to have a draw for them. And so I went to pretty much every single Neil Gaiman event. So when he did the signing at Silver Snail, when he did the one where he read Snow Glass Apples, where he did the one for Neverwhere when it came out, when he did the one for American Gods when it first came out, and then you came too for the Ocean at the End of the Lane.
Yeah.
And I think you were young enough that you came only for part of the signing, because he did signing during the World Con in 2003, and you probably wouldn't have had the patience then, because you were really little, to wait in line for the hours that it took. But it was at the chapters nearby. It wasn't affiliated with the con, but it was the chapters nearby where Wolves in the Walls had just come out, and I got him to sign a copy for us. And you loved that book. I used to read that to you.
Good. The Day I
all the
Taught My
time.
Dad to Do Goldfish.
Yes.
The Graveyard book was really good. I don't remember too much about Ocean at the End of the Lane, but I do remember reading it and enjoying my time with it. Good Omens.
Yes.
It's a solid book. Terry
I've got a
Pratchett.
story about that. So I have a proof. So a proof is like an advanced reading copy, uncorrected proof. So it's sort of, they're used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. Proofs are sort of one level before advanced reading copies, because there's often more mistakes in it, and it's usually a rougher copy where it's got like colored papers as the cover instead of any kind of artwork or anything.
Yeah.
So I've got a proof of Good Omens signed by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. And Neil Gaiman's actually written in it. He actually crossed out. Terry Pratchett said, "Burn this book," and Neil Gaiman crossed out the book and said, "Proof." And there's a little arrow pointing in the corner where to light the match. And the story is, that's not the story. The story is, I had a hardcover first printing of the American edition, and I traded it to this friend for advanced reading copy, one of the limited slipcase editions of Stardust. That was a proof also, which was unusual that it had any kind of extra stuff, right? So I could get it signed at that signing, and he gave it away. So he doesn't have it anymore either. And I thought, well, which is going to be harder to get? I could probably replace, because I picked up that Good Omens as a remaindered copy. So remainders are books that end up, the publisher doesn't want to keep them anymore on hand. The cost for storing them is worth more than the books are worth, so they just dump them at bookstores cheap. So that's why you see cheap books at bookstores for like, I don't know, $5 or $6 or something, when the original cover price is like $25 or $30.
Interesting.
And so I don't have that anymore.
A little sad.
But yeah, it is. But it's just such a... I mean, this is a friend of mine who doesn't even like to go to conventions, but it's just how I started it. So I'd go to signings, I'd go to readings and stuff. And the natural progression to that was conventions, where you just get to meet interesting people. And to me, meeting writers was so much more interesting than reading, say... Or meeting, not reading, than meeting, say, actors, right? Because I know some people get really excited about meeting famous people, and I totally get that. But to me, the people who create these worlds and these stories and all this stuff are just so much more interesting. So, yeah, like Neil Gaiman has been such a big... I mean, he's the only reason I started reading Bone by Jeff Smith.
And that was way before, I think, it was on a lot of people's radar.
Yeah, because he did an introduction for the first graphic novel compilation. I mean, this is way before. Like, it's hugely popular now, right? They colored it.
I
Scholastic
remember when it was
released
crazy popular in my school, where everybody was reading it or had read it. It was sort of the book to read.
Yeah.
Or the graphic novel to read.
But Neil Gaiman knew it was cool before it was cool, and I only found it because he blurbed it, and I ended up meeting Jeff Smith at Silver Snail. And he did this really neat sketch for me, and he didn't even charge for it. He did a co-signing, like he did a joint event with Dave Sim, who did Cerebus. And Jeff Smith was so cool too. And it was just, I still have a first printing Bone number 3 signed with a little doodle by him.
Do you know, I'm going to actually, instead of telling you this, I'm going to ask and see if you know the answer. Who do you think I believe was the most interesting person, just in terms of personal life and story, that we've ever met?
Personal life and story.
Yeah, just sort of who's told us the weird, or who's the person that we know either the weirdest thing about or has told us the weirdest story out of the authors that we've met.
Oh, I'm totally lost. Like, nothing's occurring to me right now.
Oh, because this should be really obvious if you remembered. Shawn and Maguire.
Oh, yeah. Where she was almost named like Rainbow something.
Mailbox Rainbow. Yeah, and I think it's her story. I don't think we have either the I don't want to say rights to it, but sort of, I don't think we have jurisdiction over her story to tell it for her.
Yeah,
right?
No, she needs. That's definitely something she needs to tell herself.
But she had some absolutely insane stories.
Yeah, no, there's something about storytellers, and I think there's something really powerful about how people tell stories, and when they do it really well,
Yeah.
they can really change your world.
Mm-hmm.
And they can make you see the world differently. Like Jonathan Carroll is a great example of this, where after I read one of his stories, I think, what the hell? And I look around, and everything looks just that little bit of off kilter, and where I think maybe something's just about to happen. It never does, but it feels like, wow, something magic could potentially happen if I walk out that door.
Yeah, yeah. Those are some really, really talented storytellers.
And we've met quite a few. We've been lucky. I mean, here's the thing, too. This is the beauty of going to conventions and stuff. You get to meet people before they're big. You get to follow their career, and you get to cheer them on when they really... Like John Scalzi. Like, we met him when he was doing a reading in the library.
Get Fuzzy.
He did the book wasn't even released yet. So that was the excerpt that he was reading about... or it was Get Fuzzy, or was it Fuzzy Nation?
Fuzzy Nation. It wasn't Get Fuzzy the first one?
That was by the original author, I think. So because
okay.
he did it as a sort of, what is that?
A retelling, a reboot, minus the apparently problematic nature of it.
Because it was approved, it's no longer considered what's
fan fiction.
Fan fiction, yeah, fanfic.
It's like canon. It's a separate canon. It's an alternate universe.
And what's ridiculous, I must have told the story to our viewers before, right? But the fact that we met him there, we met him again in Toronto at a convention, and then we went to NerdCon in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And we're lining up.
Oh, he remembered where we were from.
He said, "Hey, you're the guys from Toronto, right?" Like, we're not even in line in front of him yet. Like, we're in line, but we're not in front of him. And he looks over at us and says, "Hey, you guys are from Toronto, right?"
Yeah.
I mean, that's hilarious. I don't know. It's just... And listen, I'm sure that some people won't get it the same way, like, just how cool it is, but...
Or maybe we should be a little less pejorative with it. Maybe they won't get it, and maybe they just won't care.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Yeah, they don't get, like, why it actually matters. They'll probably think, yeah, nerds. But...
Perhaps they don't get it, and perhaps they just get it in their own way. And in their way, it's just like, I don't care.
It's true.
Maybe it's a little bit self-centered to make the assertion that the way that we understand and appreciate it is the objective one.
It's true. Yeah, it's just I just think it's cool because the article to me it sort of came out of nowhere because we don't get Amazon Prime, so I have not been following along with the anticipation, the premiere of American Gods. I'm almost waiting for. I feel like waiting for until it's all out before I watch it because it's, the American Gods is just one novel, right?
Yeah, it's very narrative heavy too.
Yeah, but yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. You should read that. You really should read that.
Okay.
We've got more than a couple copies at home.
Yeah. So I should get on that. Do you think we should maybe answer another Injustice question, and then at the very least get into some comic book discussion?
Okay, sure.
Okay, our next question, and this is not necessarily going to be a particularly long one, but it comes from Kon To, and they say, with the latest update, what do you... And I should say it's Konto, if we pronounced it wrong, and by we I do mean me. If I pronounced it wrong, I should take responsibility for what may be a mistake. I think is not unlikely to be a mistake. So if I pronounce that wrong, please let us know in the description how to pronounce it. And by us, I do once again mean me. Or I guess the information on how to pronounce it is useful to both of us. But the person who needs to sort of rectify the error is me and only me if it's a mistake. But anyways, they have a question. They don't just have a name. And their question is, with the latest update, who do you think is the best nth metal character? And I don't think this is a particularly hard one to answer.
Not from what we've said before. I mean, hands down, it's got to be Batman Ninja Catwoman. She's the only one, I think, that is... Like, she is top tier. Like, head and shoulders above everybody else.
Yeah.
The only argument you might make is that when at the levels where you can get them, where they're not maxed out and they're not strong enough, or they're not the strongest one on their team, then the Nightwing might have the better passive.
Because her passive sort of needs to be maxed out too for the 21 seconds.
And it's ideally all for her. right? And if she's not the strongest on the team, then the matchmaker might end up giving you something that she can't handle. Although it would surprise me if it did, unless your team was really unbalanced.
Yeah, she has the most potential at the very least.
Yeah,
at a bare minimum.
And the only time it would fail her is if your fights last a long time. Because when you get if you max out her passive and she gets 21 seconds of that damage boost, that's just from tagging in.
That's usually long enough to either use a special to knock somebody out, or if it's not, it's probably not too bad of an idea to tag her out and then tag her back in.
Yeah. So that's really the answer. I don't think I'm not a big fan of the first two medals, and I guess Shazam is interesting for his passive too, right? Shazam might be interesting if your other characters are stronger and you're on a Justice League team, because he can make an invulnerable tank out of a teammate potentially,
which is really interesting. Yeah, so I think he's more gimmicky than anything else, but making somebody else who's completely invulnerable, it's not necessarily a good strategy, just in terms of how long it takes and how much it would affect your win-loss ratio, which, if you're doing things right, should be almost entirely wins and the very, very rare loss. So it won't change that enough to make it worth it, but it is definitely a fun gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, the best strategy I can think of with him would be to have Arkham Knight Batman with Shazam, gear Shazam to be the tank, give Arkham Knight Batman the Tantu Totem. Or sorry, not Arkham Knight Batman. Arkham Knight Batman, not Arkham Knight Batman Tantu Totem. Give Shazam the Tantu Totem, so that Arkham Knight Batman can be your tank. Takes 0 damage. You tag him in. Wait until it's time to tag in Shazam. Tag him in. Do a bunch of specials until it's time to tag out, and then tag back out again. Like, you can just swap and end up with a really powerful team. And it's really, you have to make a mistake to lose with that team.
Yeah, and I think the only reason I'm not more excited, because I think we're really excited when Gingold Soda let you take 0% basic damage. And I think the only reason I'm not as excited is it feels like we've sort of had it before, right? Even though we haven't.
Well, that's true.
Because when Gingold Soda first came out, I mean, we made that video, right?
Yes. Don't Stop Me Now.
Yeah, and it sort of felt exciting. It was like, what? This is crazy, right? Like, can you imagine that? It's almost impossible to lose. All you have to do is, keep using special ones to keep them drained, and then you basically can't lose. And then, now it turns out there's a way to fully not lose, even just sitting there, right? You could leave
so there's no special damage and no damage over time either.
Yeah, so you could leave your device aside, and there's literally no way for anybody to touch you. And for some reason this time it just didn't feel as exciting as I remember it being the first time. And I think it is just because the basic damage feels like almost like enough, right? Yeah. The first time around, that it's hard to muster the exact same enthusiasm the second time, but it is definitely really cool. And it's cool that people sort of figured it out, came to us and had that sort of discussion, working out the numbers in the comments, and that was a fun time. That was a moment that was actually really cool to see the community a little bit.
Yeah, so number 1, I say Batman, Ninja, Catwoman. Number 2 to me is maybe a tie between Shazam and Nightwing. And
Shazam definitely else. If you're looking at gimmicks.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where some of the fun is, right? Because now it's almost not about winning entirely, because there's just so many different combinations you can win with. But there's only one or a limited number of ways where you can really do funky stuff, right? Like when we made Darkseid huge. The Apocalypse Darkseid. Like, we have a playlist of like gimmicky kind of things, right? Like glitches that are in the play, but not to take advantage of the game, but just like freaky stuff.
Yeah. And I think one thing to also be said for Shazam, which has nothing to do with the game itself, is that I've been seeing a lot more stuff for the movie recently, and it's looking like it has the potential to be good. It's looking a little weird.
Yes, and it's goofy, and I think that helps it a little bit, because remember I was talking last week about how part of the trouble that Titans has is because of how it looks, and it's hard to take it seriously when it's trying to be serious too much. But what's funny is, all right, so that's Shazam is really Captain Marvel. We just saw the Marvel's Captain Marvel movie over the weekend.
Yeah. And I think just one last thing on Shazam. I don't know if that's just from the promotional material that I've seen, but I don't even think I've really seen what's supposed to be the drama or the crux of it. I think I've just seen goofy material for it, which is interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I've actually seen like the big bad guy in the trailer or anything.
Oh, you
like
have.
That.
It's what's his name? Mark Strong, the guy from Kick-Ass and
Stardust?
Stardust. Yeah, I don't know why I kept on wanting to say Starstruck, but
so then maybe it just hasn't stuck with me. But I don't. Yeah, because
he's
I don't
the
even
bald
remember.
guy with the electricity coming. Like they were doing that fight.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But see, maybe the problem is that there's been so many superhero movies where the focus is on just the grimdark stuff that the levity sort of stands out more, right?
Yeah. So, anyways, you were mentioning we saw Captain Marvel, and I think it's safe to say it was pretty good. It was enjoyable.
Out of the Marvel Universe movies, I think it's probably my second favorite.
What's your favorite?
The first Avengers, just because it was unexpected. Like I didn't expect it to be like that. And what I liked about Captain Marvel was, I mean, not only Brie Larson, she carried herself in a way where you think, man, all right, get out of her way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was just that a lot of the stuff that it touched on, so what's hilarious is, so there's been a lot of internet pushback about the things she said about representation and women and people of color, right?
Yeah, I don't actually know the thing that she said. I know there's been pushback, but...
Yeah, and it almost doesn't matter because it's not her. It's the whole movie. I mean, it's not even like it's unsubtle. It plays really well as part of the story. Where, all right, so this is a bit of a spoiler for anybody who's maybe hasn't read comics for 10 years. I think so. Next 2 minutes, you probably want to mute it. But the fact that the Skrulls are not the bad guys. And there's a moment, and I made the mistake because I couldn't remember exactly what Spy was like, but the fact that they cast Jude Law in it gave me one of those kind of deja vu moments that if you haven't seen the movie, you won't know what I mean, and if you do have seen the movie, then you'll totally get it.
Where you turned to me and were like, oh, it's a callback to Spy, and I'm like, that's not what?
That's not how it works, because it's a totally different movie, different director, different universe, right?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I don't think they make references based off of actors, right?
But
I don't think there's actor references.
Okay, but it's a moment where I think, oh, I felt, okay, we've been here. And then they take a twist. There's a deviation right at the end, but still, I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if I would say it's my second favorite Marvel movie, just because I've seen a lot of really good Marvel movies. Thor Ragnarok was really good.
Oh, you're right. All right, so but you know what? It's not.
I've heard Spider-Man: Homecoming was pretty spectacular too, just from a tone perspective. Right. And so I haven't seen that yet, so I can't comment on that. I think it doesn't do too much totally new, but it has enough kind of nice twists and turns that it's engaging. It's not too dark or too light. I think it nails its tone pretty well. I think there's enough sort of aspects of tie into the rest of the Marvel universe to make it interesting. And I think it's visually like any other Marvel movie. It looks really good.
Okay, so maybe I appreciate this kind of thing more than I should, but one of the things I've always liked to say about Tim Powers was taking the constraints that you're working with and then making it work. And so the one thing I thought was cool was, so they've got this character is basically the most powerful thing that they've actually introduced in the movie short of Thanos, right? And so they need somebody to stand up to Thanos. And part of the way they'd explain the story was that it all makes sense in the context of why she hasn't been there. Like the moment where Infinity War, where Thanos is destroying everybody, right, and killing half the people. So why is she going to appear now and have it not feel like Deus Ex Machina?
God from the machine. Deus Ex Machina. Because it's from Latin, and Latin always has hard C's.
And, there's these moments, I mean, maybe I shouldn't appreciate it more because I was aware of it happening. All right, another spoiler, mute it for 30 seconds if you haven't seen it. That where they place it in time really easily and well with very little exposition where it doesn't have
basically
to have an
Blockbuster and Radio Shack.
Right, she crashes through Blockbuster. And, all right, so when we're watching it, and they're asking her, well, where would we get communication equipment, right? Your mom, before it appeared on the screen, say, oh, I know where it's going to be.
Yeah. And then she said it. I think we're after maybe the 30-second window, so we shouldn't make reference back to what we said earlier, just in case.
But yeah, I think they did some really clever things with storytelling. Like it was just it was potentially a really convoluted kind of story.
Yeah,
and it worked in a way I didn't expect.
Yeah. So that's what I think. It's a really solid kind of mainline entry into the Marvel canon, and it does some stuff interesting. It's not groundbreaking. Like, I think all of these big blockbusters sort of have difficulty doing something really truly kind of new, unique, and where you walk away saying like, wow, right? I think most of the time I felt that way about like the new Star Wars movies. I felt that way about Infinity War, where it's like, oh, visually really interesting. I had some issues with different like moments and points in the story, right? Or with just sort of kind of, because I think a lot of the times when I go to the movies, I either go because it's something that's really culturally relevant, like, you know, Marvel movies or Avengers, or I think it's something that I'm going to find really, really good. And I think I always walk away from the culturally significant ones finding them a lot more forgettable, right? I think the popular ones that I go to, instead of the ones that I think I'm going to specifically like love, I always take away a little bit less from.
That's an interesting take. And I've heard that kind of thing is one of the problems with the Oscars now. But because, you know, they end up rewarding not the kind of movies that people actually see.
Yeah, but I did quite enjoy Captain Marvel.
Yeah,
it was solid. It was definitely up there for me with all the Marvel movies that I've seen, which is a good sort of sign.
Yeah, for sure. That, you know what, too, I guess I should, you know, it's Deadpool part of the universe, because I like Deadpool a lot.
I
just realized too.
Deadpool is not part of the MCU for sure.
Okay, all right.
I mean, for sure.
Okay, and so we've hit the end of the video. We've actually run out of footage. I don't know if I'm going to stick something else, but iProphet did not take advantage of a joke this time, so I brought my own. And
okay.
I remember this, and I think I told it to you guys in the car, and I actually had to look up a version of it that was a little bit more polished, because I knew I'd forgotten it properly.
Yeah.
So, and this is one of those benefits. This is one of our Patreon benefits that you could get. You could bring your own joke and have us read it online in the video if you're supporting us at the Your Message Here tier.
If you want that instead.
All right. So one night, we'll call this guy George. He went to the bar. He's having a good...
Sorry, before we do this, I'm looking at the joke now. Are you going to edit the profanity out, or do we need a profanity warning?
No, I'm going to edit. I'm going to just use non-profane words.
Okay.
So he's having a good time. He's having some drinks. Everything's going great. So as the night goes on, he keeps drinking, and he throws up all over himself, and he's made a big mess on his shirt. And he says, "Oh, crap. My wife's going to kill me. She's going to... no, I stayed out all night and got drunk." And the bartender goes, "Well, it's okay. Just put $20 in your shirt pocket. Tell her some guy here threw up on you, gave you $20 to get the shirt clean." "That's a great idea," George says. And he puts some money in his pocket. So he finishes his night, he takes a cab home, and as he walks through the door, his wife is standing there, and she's upset. His wife says, "Hey, look at you. You're drunk. You've thrown up all over yourself. You're disgusting." And George goes, No, honey. You got it all wrong. When I was at the bar, some guy threw up on me, and he put $20 in my pocket to get it clean." And so she pulls out the money and says, "Yeah, but there's 40 here." And George goes, "Oh, yeah. He took a dump in my pants, too."
Okay, there we go. Not quite as relevant as iProphet's regular joke, but
yeah,
it'll do in a pinch.
Okay,
there we go. I think now is the point we've talked around it. iProphet is able to send messages into us, as well as a few other people, because he is a supporter of us on Patreon. You can support us on patreon.com/BDCKR if you want to become a member yourself. But in the meantime, we've got a healthy little group of patrons who are consistently, and all of them for a while now, have been supporting our videos, and we super appreciate all that they've done and sort of allowed us to do, including one of the first things that we did with the money after the first set of months was purchase one of the mics that we're now currently using. So they kind of absorbed the cost of me going out to university because we would have needed a new mic, and they sort of rolled in the cost and made that part of our sort of operating budget that we had for YouTube.
That's right.
So a huge thank you to Console Peasant and Eddy G, who are supporting us at the highest last word tier, iProphet, who is supporting us at the Your Message Here tier, and Shawn, Farrell, and Daniel Simonson supporting us on the credit level, and last but not least, Laszlo Georgiades and Chris Wolf supporting us on the gratitude tier. Thank you guys all so much. Your support is really appreciated. And a huge thank you to all of you guys for watching or listening, especially if you've made it right from the start to the finish. We'll see you guys next time.
Komoda.